The discovery. In the dim light of a crumbling cityscape, where remnants of humanity clung desperately to survival, Jax wandered through what remained of an old industrial district. Rusted machinery loomed like ancient giants, their once powerful forms now reduced to scrap metal and memories. He had learned early on that this place was both dangerous and full of potential treasures waiting to be uncovered. Jax was known among his peers as one of the best scavengers in New Haven. With tousled hair and piercing green eyes, he had an aura of determination that drew people in but also kept them at arm's length. His past was shrouded in mystery, whispers of tragedy followed him like shadows. But here, among the debris, he felt at home, free from judgment. As he sifted through piles of discarded technology, his mind wandered back to his childhood, days filled with laughter before loss had changed everything. Shaking off the memories, he focused on his surroundings, searching for anything that might hold value. His fingers brushed against something cool and metallic, half buried under layers of grime. Suddenly, a faint sound caught his attention, a soft whimper that seemed out of place in this desolate environment. Intrigued, he followed the sound until he stumbled upon a small clearing formed by collapsed machinery. There, beneath a massive sheet of metal, lay a girl unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in hues of blue and violet, almost glowing in the dim light. Striking silver eyes met his gaze with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Help me." Jax's heart raced as he assessed her situation. The metal slab pinned her down tightly, it would take considerable strength to lift it off. "Hold on," he said instinctively, rushing forward without fully understanding why he felt compelled to help this stranger. "I'm Lyra," she managed to say before another wave of fear washed over her as she glanced up at the looming machinery above them. "The compactor, it's still active." Jax quickly glanced around. Indeed, he could hear the distant hum of machinery stirring back to life. Time was running out. "Just breathe," he instructed her calmly while searching for something, anything, that could aid him in lifting the heavy metal sheet. As panic threatened to consume him, something deep within urged him onward. He gripped the edge of the slab with both hands, straining against its weight while calling upon every ounce of strength he possessed. "On 3, he said through gritted teeth. 1, 2, 3. With all his might, he pushed upward. The metal groaned but didn't budge significantly at first. Just as despair began to creep in, he felt an unexpected surge of energy coursing through him, an instinctive drive fueled by adrenaline and determination. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise as she felt something shift above her. With one final push, Jax managed to lift the slab just enough for her to wriggle free from its grasp. She scrambled out from underneath it and collapsed onto the ground beside him. "Thank you," she gasped, panting heavily as relief washed over her features. Jax knelt beside her, trying to catch his breath while taking in her ethereal beauty, her luminescent skin contrasting sharply against the grime-covered ground. "What happened? How did you end up here?" he asked curiously. "My family, they abandoned me," she replied bitterly, brushing dirt from her arms as she struggled to regain composure. "They thought I was unworthy because of my bloodline." Jax frowned at her words. There was something hauntingly familiar about them, a reflection of his own experiences with betrayal and loss. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly, surprising himself with his sincerity. Lyra looked at him with gratitude mixed with confusion. "But why would you help me? I'm just an alien girl lost among humans." "Because everyone deserves a chance," Jax replied firmly, feeling an unexpected connection forming between them, a bond forged in shared pain. Before they could delve deeper into conversation, distant sounds echoed through the air, engines roaring closer as shadows loomed overhead. Panic surged within Lyra once more as she recognized what was coming for them. "They're coming," she exclaimed urgently. "Who?" Jax asked while scanning their surroundings for an escape route. "The cleaners," she explained hastily. "My brother's hunters, they'll stop at nothing to retrieve me." Realizing they were running out of time, Jax grabbed Lyra's hand instinctively as they both sprang into action. He led her through narrow paths between towering piles of scrap metal while adrenaline coursed through their veins. As they navigated through the industrial maze, Jax felt a sense of purpose igniting within him, a fire fueled by hope that perhaps this encounter would change everything for both of them. With every step they took together into uncertainty, their fates intertwined, their journey had only just begun. The escape. As the hoverbike roared through the twisted paths of the scrapyard, Jax felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The distant whine of engines and the crackle of plasma bolts reminded him that they were not alone. Lyra clung tightly to him, her breath warm against his back, as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Pursued by danger. Behind them, sleek black ships sliced through the smog, their weapons primed and ready. Jax glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of the Cleaners, a ruthless group known for hunting down rogue aliens. "We need to lose them," he shouted over the roar of the engine. Lyra nodded, her silver eyes wide with fear but also determination. "I can help," she said, her voice steadying him. "I have abilities, powers that can disrupt their systems." Jax raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "Powers? What do you mean?" "I can manipulate energy," she explained quickly. "If you give me a moment, I can create a diversion. A plan in motion." "All right," Jax replied, trusting his instincts. "Just tell me when." As they sped through narrow passages, weaving between towering heaps of metal, Lyra closed her eyes and concentrated. Jax could feel the air around them shift as she summoned her energy. The bike surged forward as if propelled by an unseen force. Suddenly, a brilliant flash erupted behind them, illuminating the darkened scrapyard with blinding light. The Cleaners' ships faltered, momentarily disoriented by the explosion of energy. Jax seized the opportunity and pushed the throttle to its limit. "We've got to keep moving," he urged. Finding refuge. They raced through the maze of scrap until they reached a hidden alcove formed by a collapsed building. Jax skidded to a halt and jumped off the bike, helping Lyra down gently. They crouched behind a pile of debris, their hearts pounding in unison. "Did it work?" Lyra asked breathlessly. Jax peered out from their hiding spot and saw that the Cleaners were regrouping but seemed to be confused about which direction to pursue them. "For now, yes," he replied with a sigh of relief. Lyra leaned against the cold metal, her expression shifting from fear to gratitude. "Thank you for trusting me," she said softly. Jax shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the warmth spreading in his chest at her words. "You saved us both back there." A growing bond. As they caught their breath in silence, Jax couldn't shake off the feeling that this encounter was more than mere chance. Lyra's presence stirred something deep within him, a longing for connection he had buried long ago after losing everything he held dear. "What were you doing in that scrapyard?" he asked, breaking the silence. Lyra hesitated before answering. "I was sent away by my family. My brother wanted me gone because he thought I was weak." Her voice trembled slightly as she recalled her painful past. "They thought I would bring shame to our house." Jax felt a pang of empathy for her plight. He too had faced abandonment and betrayal in his life. "You're not weak," he said firmly. "You're strong for surviving this long." Lyra met his gaze, and for a moment, their eyes locked in understanding, two souls adrift in a world that had cast them aside. The road ahead. After regaining their composure, Jax knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. "We need to find somewhere safe," he said decisively. "Where do we go?" Lyra asked. "There's an old rebel hideout not far from here," Jax suggested. "They might be able to help us." Lyra nodded, determination returning to her features. "Lead the way." As they made their way out of the alcove and back onto their hover bike, Jax felt an exhilarating sense of purpose wash over him. With Lyra by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. into uncertainty. The journey was tense as they navigated through abandoned streets and crumbling buildings. Every sound made them jump, every shadow felt like a threat looming over them. But with each mile they traveled together, Jax felt his resolve strengthen. "What will you do once we reach the rebels?" Lyra asked as they rode on. "I want to help people like us," Jax replied honestly. "Those who have been forgotten or betrayed by their families." Lyra smiled softly at his words, a flicker of hope igniting within her heart. For so long she had felt alone in her struggle, now she found comfort in knowing someone else understood her pain. A new beginning. Finally arriving at the rebel hideout, a nondescript building shrouded in shadows, Jax parked the hover bike and dismounted with Lyra close behind him. As they approached the entrance, apprehension crept back into his mind. "What if they don't accept us?" Lyra whispered nervously. Jax turned to her and took her hands in his own reassuringly. "We'll face it together." With that promise echoing between them, he pushed open the door and stepped inside, a new chapter waiting to unfold as they entered a world filled with uncertainty but also possibility. Unlikely allies. The air inside the rebel hideout was thick with tension and the scent of burnt metal. Dim lights flickered overhead, casting shadows on the walls adorned with makeshift maps and posters of resistance leaders. Jax felt a rush of adrenaline as he stepped into the room, Lyra by his side. This place was a sanctuary for those who had been cast aside, and he hoped it would offer them the safety they desperately needed. A room full of strangers. The rebels were gathered in small groups, their conversations hushed but urgent. Jax scanned the room, noting the diversity among them, humans and aliens alike, all united by a common cause. He spotted a tall figure with a rugged demeanor standing at the front, addressing the crowd. "Listen up," the man shouted, his voice booming across the room. "We have reports of increased cleaners' activity in the area. We need to be ready for anything." Jax recognized him as Kellen, one of the most respected leaders among the rebels. He had heard stories about Kellen's bravery and tactical genius. With a deep breath, Jax stepped forward, pulling Lyra along with him. "Excuse me," Jax called out, drawing Kellen's attention. "We need your help." Kellen turned to face them, his sharp gaze assessing both Jax and Lyra. "Who are you?" he asked, crossing his arms. "I'm Jax, and this is Lyra," he introduced himself quickly. "We just escaped from the cleaners. They're after her." Kellen's expression shifted slightly as he took in Lyra's unusual appearance. "An alien girl? You know that could put us all at risk." "She's not just any alien," Jax replied passionately. "She has powers that can help us fight back against the cleaners. We need to work together." Skepticism and hope. Kellen studied Lyra intently, his brow furrowing in thought. "What kind of powers?" he asked cautiously. "I can manipulate energy," Lyra explained, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I can create distractions or disrupt their technology." A murmur of skepticism rippled through the crowd. Jax could see doubt etched on many faces, they had been betrayed too often to trust easily. "Why should we believe you?" one rebel shouted from the back. "Because I've been hunted by my own family," Lyra replied fiercely, her silver eyes flashing with determination. "I know what it means to be abandoned and alone. I want to fight against those who would oppress us." Kellen raised a hand to silence the crowd and turned back to Lyra. "If what you say is true, we could use your abilities. But trust is earned here, not given freely." Jax felt a surge of frustration but knew Kellen was right, they had to prove themselves first. "What do we need to do?" he asked. "A test of loyalty." Kellen considered for a moment before nodding slowly. "We're planning a mission tonight to sabotage a cleaner supply route nearby. If you can help us succeed, I'll consider bringing you into our ranks." Lyra nodded resolutely, determination shining in her eyes. "I'm ready." "Good," Kellen said, gesturing for them to follow him deeper into the hideout. "Let's prepare." As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, Jax felt a sense of camaraderie building among them, a shared purpose that transcended their differences. They entered a larger room filled with maps spread across tables and various weapons laid out for inspection. Strategizing for success. Kellen gathered everyone around and began outlining their plan. "This is our target," he said, pointing to a marked spot on the map, a heavily guarded supply depot used by the cleaners. "We'll split into 2 teams," Kellen continued. "One will create a diversion while the other infiltrates the depot to destroy their supplies." Jax listened intently as Kellen assigned roles to each member of the group. When it came time to assign roles for Lyra and him, Kellen looked at them thoughtfully. "Jax, you'll lead one team with Lyra as your second-in-command," Kellen decided. Jax felt a mix of excitement and apprehension at being given such responsibility so quickly. "What about you?" he asked. "I'll lead the diversion team," Kellen replied firmly. "We'll create chaos while you strike from within." Lyra squeezed Jax's arm gently, offering silent support as they prepared for their first mission together. Preparing for battle. As they gathered their gear, makeshift weapons and tools crafted from scavenged materials, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging that had eluded him for so long. He glanced at Lyra as she focused intently on her equipment. There was something powerful about her resolve that inspired him. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly as they finished gearing up. Lyra met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "I am ready to fight for something greater than myself." With adrenaline pumping through their veins, they joined their fellow rebels as they made their way toward their target under the cover of nightfall. Into enemy territory. The journey through darkened streets was tense but exhilarating. Every shadow seemed alive with potential danger as they approached the cleaner supply depot nestled between towering buildings that loomed like sentinels over them. As they reached their designated positions, Jax turned to Lyra one last time before they split up with Kellen's team. "Stay close and trust your instincts," he urged her. Lyra nodded solemnly but smiled reassuringly in return, a silent promise that they would watch each other's backs no matter what happened next. With one final glance at each other, they moved into position, 2 unlikely allies bound by fate, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The mission. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rebel hideout, Jax and Lyra prepared for their first mission together. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and the air buzzed with whispered strategies and nervous energy. Jax felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was their chance to prove themselves and make a difference. Gathering the team. Kellen stood at the front of the room, his voice steady as he outlined the plan. "Tonight, we hit the cleaner supply depot. We need to disrupt their operations and send a message that we won't be silenced." He gestured to a map spread across a table, marking key points of entry and escape routes. Jax exchanged glances with Lyra, who appeared focused yet slightly apprehensive. "We can do this," he reassured her. "We'll watch each other's backs." The rebel group was diverse, comprising humans and aliens alike, each with their own reasons for fighting against the cleaners. Jax felt a sense of unity forming among them, a shared purpose that transcended their individual struggles. "Lyra," Kellen said, turning his attention to her. "Your abilities will be crucial tonight. We'll need you to create a diversion while Jax leads the infiltration team." Lyra nodded, determination shining in her silver eyes. "I won't let you down." Preparing for action. As they gathered their gear, makeshift weapons, energy disruptors, and supplies, Jax felt a sense of camaraderie growing among them. He could see the resolve on everyone's faces. They were ready to fight for something greater than themselves. "Remember," Kellen reminded them as they suited up, "we're not just fighting for ourselves but for everyone who has suffered under the cleaner's rule." Jax felt a surge of pride at being part of something bigger than himself. He glanced at Lyra, who was adjusting her equipment with precision. She looked fierce and capable, ready to unleash her powers when needed. "Are you ready?" he asked her quietly. Lyra met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "I am ready to fight for our freedom." With that promise hanging between them, they moved toward the exit, stepping out into the night, where danger awaited but so did hope. The approach. As they approached the cleaner supply depot under the cover of darkness, Jax's heart raced with anticipation. The building loomed ahead, heavily guarded by sleek black ships hovering above and armed guards patrolling the perimeter. "Stay low," Jax instructed his team as they crept closer to the entrance. The sounds of machinery hummed ominously in the background, reminding them of what was at stake. Lyra's fingers tingled with energy as she prepared to use her abilities for their diversion. "Just give me the signal," she whispered. Jax nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline course through him. He could sense that this mission would test them both in ways they had never imagined. The diversion. Kellen's team moved into position first, creating chaos on one side of the depot to draw attention away from Jax and Lyra's infiltration team. Explosions erupted in the distance as Kellen led his group in an all-out assault against the guards. "Now!" Jax shouted as he and Lyra dashed toward their entry point, a side door that led into the heart of the supply depot. Lyra focused her energy as they moved swiftly inside. With a wave of her hand, she sent arcs of energy crackling toward a nearby control panel, causing sparks to fly and alarms to blare throughout the facility. "Let's go," Jax urged as they slipped through the door just before it sealed shut behind them. Inside enemy lines. The interior was dimly lit but filled with machinery that hummed ominously. Jax quickly scanned their surroundings. Crates stacked high against walls labeled with alien symbols contained supplies vital to the cleaners' operations. "We need to find their main control room," he said urgently. "That's where we can do the most damage." Lyra nodded in agreement as they navigated through narrow corridors lined with flickering lights. The sound of footsteps echoed nearby, guards were closing in on their location. "Quickly!" Jax whispered as they ducked behind a stack of crates just as two guards rounded the corner. A close call. The guards were chatting casually about their patrols when Lyra suddenly raised her hand, summoning energy around her fingertips. "I can create an illusion," she whispered. "It will distract them long enough for us to slip by." "Do it," Jax urged. With a flick of her wrist, Lyra conjured an image of another guard appearing further down the corridor, a perfect replica that began shouting orders at invisible soldiers. The real guards turned abruptly, drawn by the commotion. "Hey! What's going on?" one shouted before rushing toward Lyra's illusion. Jax seized the moment and pulled Lyra along as they slipped past undetected. They exchanged relieved glances. Teamwork had saved them once again. Reaching their goal. After navigating several more corridors filled with tension and close calls, they finally reached a large door labeled Control Room. Jax took a deep breath. This was it, the heart of cleaner operations lay just beyond this door. "Are you ready?" he asked Lyra, who nodded firmly despite her nerves. Together, they pushed through the door and entered a room buzzing with activity. Screens displaying live feeds from various parts of the facility surrounded them. Operators were busy monitoring systems while others frantically typed on keyboards. "We need to shut this down," Jax said decisively as he approached one of the consoles. Lyra stepped beside him and focused her energy once more. "I can disrupt their systems," she said confidently. "But I'll need time." "Just do it," Jax replied as he began typing commands into another console. They worked in tandem, Lyra harnessing her powers while Jax navigated through security protocols to access vital systems. The countdown begins. As Lyra concentrated on disrupting power flows throughout the facility, alarms began blaring louder than ever before, a sign that their presence had been detected. "We're running out of time," Jax exclaimed as he frantically typed commands into his console while keeping an eye on approaching guards on surveillance screens. "I'm almost there." Lyra replied through gritted teeth as arcs of energy danced around her hands like lightning. Just then, an explosion rocked the building. Kellen's diversion had worked. The guards outside rushed toward the chaos while Jax seized the opportunity to finalize his commands. "I've got it," he shouted triumphantly just as Lyra unleashed her power. Flashes of energy surged through circuits like wildfire until everything went dark around them. The entire facility plunged into chaos. Victory or defeat? With alarms blaring and lights flickering ominously overhead, Jax turned to Lyra with exhilaration written across his face. "We did it." But before they could celebrate their victory, heavy footsteps echoed outside. The guards were regrouping fast. "Time to go," Lyra urged urgently as she grabbed his hand once more. Together they raced back toward their exit route, their hearts pounding not just from exertion but from exhilaration at having taken such bold action against their oppressors. As they sprinted through darkened corridors filled with uncertainty, a bright future awaited them outside. Facing the past. The air was thick with tension as Jax and Lyra made their way back to the rebel hideout after successfully sabotaging the cleaner supply depot. The adrenaline from their mission still coursed through their veins, but the reality of what lay ahead weighed heavily on them. They had made a significant impact tonight, but the battle was far from over. A moment of reflection. As they entered the hideout, Jax felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. The rebels greeted them with cheers, celebrating their success. Lyra stood beside him, her expression a mix of pride and uncertainty. She had proven her worth, but Jax could see the shadows of her past lurking just beneath the surface. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, noticing her distant gaze. Lyra took a deep breath, shaking off her thoughts. "I'm just thinking about what comes next," she admitted. "My brother won't stop until he finds me." Jax understood the weight of her words. "We'll figure it out together," he promised, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." Revelations in the dark. That night, as they gathered around a flickering fire in the hideout, Kellen called for everyone's attention. "We need to discuss our next steps," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "The cleaners will retaliate after tonight's events. We need to be prepared." Jax listened intently as Kellen outlined their options, but his mind kept drifting back to Lyra's brother, the very person who had cast her aside. He couldn't shake the feeling that they would soon have to confront this looming threat head-on. After the meeting, Jax found Lyra sitting alone on a crate outside, staring up at the stars that twinkled through the smoggy sky. He joined her, feeling an unspoken connection between them. "Do you ever miss home?" he asked softly. Lyra sighed, her silver eyes reflecting the faint light. "Sometimes," she replied. "But home is complicated now. My family is not what I thought they were. A sister's betrayal." As she spoke, Jax could see the pain etched across her face. "What happened between you and your brother?" he pressed gently. Lyra hesitated before sharing her story. "My brother was always ambitious," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "He wanted power and influence within our royal family. When I was born with a bloodline deemed impure, he saw me as a threat to his ambitions." Jax listened intently as Lyra recounted how her brother had convinced their father that she was unfit to rule, a betrayal that had led to her exile. "They thought disposing of me would secure his position," she said bitterly. "That's horrible," Jax replied, feeling anger rise within him at the injustice she had faced. Lyra nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought family would protect me, but instead, they turned against me." A new resolve. In that moment, Jax felt an overwhelming urge to protect Lyra, to ensure that she would never feel abandoned again. "You're stronger than you realize," he said firmly. "You've survived so much already." Lyra looked at him with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. Their moment was interrupted by Kellen's voice calling for them from inside the hideout. "We need to strategize for our next move." gather everyone. As they rejoined the group, Jax felt a renewed sense of purpose, determined not only to fight against the cleaners but also to help Lyra reclaim her sense of belonging. The calm before the storm. Over the next few days, Jax and Lyra trained alongside the other rebels, honing their skills and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. Lyra's powers grew stronger with each passing day. She learned to harness energy in ways that amazed even herself. But despite their progress, an undercurrent of tension lingered in the air. Everyone knew that Lyra's brother would not rest until he found her. The rebels worked tirelessly to fortify their defenses and gather intelligence on cleaner movements. One evening, as they gathered around a table covered in maps and reports, Kellen looked at Lyra with concern etched across his face. "We need to know what we're up against," he said seriously. "If your brother is leading the cleaners' search for you, we need a plan." Lyra nodded slowly, determination replacing fear in her expression. "I can help," she offered. "I know how they operate. I can give you insights into their strategies." Preparing for confrontation. With Lyra's knowledge guiding them, they began formulating a plan to confront the cleaners head-on, a risky move that could either lead to victory or disaster. As they strategized late into the night, Jax felt an unshakable bond forming between him and Lyra, a partnership forged through shared struggles and mutual respect. "Whatever happens," he said quietly as they finalized their plans, "we'll face it together." Lyra smiled softly at him, a warmth spreading through his chest as he realized how much she meant to him. The calm before battle. Days passed quickly as preparations continued for their upcoming confrontation with Lyra's brother and his forces. The rebels fortified their hideout while gathering supplies and weapons for what lay ahead. But amidst all this chaos, Jax found moments of peace with Lyra, sharing stories about their pasts and dreams for a better future during quiet evenings under the stars. One night as they sat together outside beneath a blanket of stars, Jax turned to Lyra with seriousness in his tone. "When this is over, what do you want?" Lyra pondered his question before answering thoughtfully. "I want to find my place in this world, somewhere I belong." Jax nodded in understanding. He too longed for belonging after years of feeling like an outsider. Facing their fears. As they prepared for battle against Lyra's brother, the weight of uncertainty hung heavy over them both, fear mingled with hope as they steeled themselves for what lay ahead. On the eve of their confrontation, Jax couldn't shake off feelings of doubt creeping into his mind. What if they failed? What if Lyra was lost again? But then he looked at her, her determination shining bright, and knew deep down that together they could overcome anything life threw at them. With hearts full of courage and resolve, they prepared themselves for what would be one of their greatest challenges yet, the confrontation that would determine not only Lyra's fate but also their own.